I'm Dr. Jay Anders, and this is Tell Me Where It Hurts, where we discuss some of the big challenges in health IT and how we can solve them so clinicians can do what they do best, care for patients. I'd like to welcome everyone to the HIMSS and ViVE edition of Tell Me Where It Hurts. I've had the opportunity to talk to many industry leaders, and I hope you enjoy listening to what they have to say. Welcome to a trade show episode of Tell Me Where It Hurts. I'm here with Colin, Banas, who is part of Dr. First. He's their Chief Medical Officer. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your HIMSS experience here and what you're seeing and what you think the major trends are.
Yeah, day one, super busy. It's probably fair to say that HIMSS has rebounded. HIMSS is back from the depths of 2021, 2022. It's very busy. The exhibit hall is massive this year. There's a lot of activity, and this is only day one. So as far as trends, obviously you can't go anywhere in health IT these days without tripping over AI. It's almost not even worth mentioning anymore, but we can talk about that. The other thing in the particular interest to me is interoperability. So I think there's a lot of focus on interoperability, whether that's because of recent regulations that have been announced, whether there's technologies in the exhibit hall that people want to showcase related to interoperability. But that is something that is worth tackling, and that is something that Dr. First has a vested interest in tackling as well.
Very good. Yeah, I actually had a conversation last night with some folks from the ONC about the interoperability and their push and all of that. And it looks like it's actually going to happen. It's starting to look real, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
We're 15 years after meaningful use, where meaningful use was supposed to solve all of this. We're finally starting to see some of the benefit. I think a lot of us would say it's still not fast enough, but there is a framework, and there is progress, and there are measurements. And so one of my observations, and I've been doing health IT for over 20 years now, is that if the private sector is not going to get it right, the government is eventually going to step in and guide it. And that's what's happened now. So you're seeing new rules from the ONC and CMS related to prior authorization, related to interoperability. TEFCA is now 2 years old. We have our first QHINs in December of last year. So 5 or 6 QHINs have gone live. 2 more are on the way. So, as a clinician, it's still not fast enough. But there's something to attach onto. There's reason to hope.
Yeah, one of the things that excited me the most was when it actually starts to happen. One of the things, I'm an internist, so I want to see everything there is to know about a patient. Everything. Don't hold anything back.
With minimal effort.
With minimal effort, and please sort it for me.
Yep.
One of the problems I've seen that people have started to surface is now that we're interoperable, I'll put that in quotes, I'll get 80 pages of a PDF. Yep. What in the world am I going to do with that? So the next step for that is how do you sort it? How do you present it? How do you get it in the form that a clinician can use it?
You nailed it.
At the point of care. So I'm really excited about some of the technologies out there that's going to start to do that for us as physicians.
Yeah, there's 2 fundamental problems in interoperability so far. One is what I call the semantic interoperability problem. So we got decent in the last 10 years of moving data from A to B. But it's blob data a lot of the times. It's free text, it's unstructured, it's non-digestible by the receiving system. One of the things Dr. First pioneered within the last decade is a way to make a lot of that data digestible, especially when it relates to medications. That's the sweet spot for Dr. First as a company. So we do semantic interoperability for things as important as medication reconciliation or allergies or immunizations. The second problem, which you just touched on, is a volume problem, right? We went from when you and I were practicing, 10, 20 years ago to not having any external data to now we might have too much external data.
Yeah.
That's where something like LLM and generative AI, summarization, things like that can actually, not only codify the data, but actually put it in a digestible and readable, human readable format.
Yep.
That's huge. And you start to mix in things like optical character recognition and image transfer and things like that. You're going to get to where you and I wanted to be, albeit we're going to be 20 years later. But
yeah, I still remember the old days. We were in a multi-specialty group practice. There were 125 of us. And they always went to the internal medicine department to get that source of truth because our notes were the best.
Yeah, you would consult ID, so they would write a nice note.
Exactly.
Orthopedics does that all the time. Shout out to my orthopedics.
Yeah. Colin, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we could do this all day.
Very good.
Yeah.
Have a great show.
I appreciate that.
I'd like to welcome everybody for the trade show edition of Tell Me Where It Hurts. I'm here with Dr. John Blair, who is the CEO of MedAllies. And MedAllies is a Q-hand, which is on everybody's lips these days. So tell us a little bit about what's going on at MedAllies and what do you see here that's assisting in your quest of what you're trying to look for?
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here today. Looking forward to the conversation. So MedAllies, as we just said, has been a recently designated Q-hand. We're one of the first 7 now. We were initially, there was 5 in December. There have been 2 added since then. And so now what we're all about is taking the work we've been doing for the last 2 years and building the platform and getting all of the legal, contractual stuff together and governance together, which is very extensive. Now we're implementing. So we have about 6 companies that we've contracted with that we will be bringing on over the first half of this year. One of them is Veradigm. They're the first that are going live with us. They actually are going live this week. And what they bring is they introduce a whole sector of the healthcare market, the small physician practices that have been left out of all of these national networks. They come into the fold. And so over the next couple of years, you'll see a couple of thousand practices, 20, 30,000 providers and all their staff that have not been part of this that will. So they can interact with the big epics of the world and all the others, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing on, in addition to that, a first responder company, Beyond Lucid Technology. So now, for the first time ever, if somebody is in a car wreck or something and an EMS responder shows up where they'd be happy just to have a name, they're going to be able to get the patient's medication list, problem list, allergies right out of the gate when they're picking them up in the street on an accident.
Wow, that is amazing because one of the holy grails I thought about in interoperability is getting that complete picture of a patient, regardless of where you are or what you need. As an internist, I always wanted everything, wanted to know everything. So it sounds like you guys are headed down that path in places that has been hard to get to.
Oh yeah. I mean, the first responder comment, they'd be happy to have anything. And, they don't really need, your point's well taken. You need, in many cases, a very extensive record. But in many cases, if you just had the medication and allergy list,
Absolutely.
the problem list, what you could look at in 10 seconds, if you just had that, it would make a world of difference. So think about how many lives are going to be saved just by entering that stakeholder group. Another one, we have a couple of consumer-facing companies that we will be connecting here by the middle of the year. Now, there's much more to that than just connecting them, but that group, those new connections, have the potential over the next 24 months of bringing on 150 million new consumers that will have access to these national networks. Now, what's the rub? They'll be connected. That platform can address the consumer's needs. They'll be connected to the network, but then the next thing is who will respond. And so that's going to be a whole nother issue is, although you've got all of these endpoints that respond to treatment readily, now that you introduce a new use case, individual access service, that's going to take some time because you've got to decide, what you're comfortable with, and that'll be the next thing. But anyway, these are interesting and exciting new opportunities.
Have you had anybody in the provider world talk to you about when they receive all this information, how they're going to cope with all of it coming in? Because I've seen some of these transmissions, 80 pages of PDFs coming across from somewhere about Mrs. Smith. Have you had any conversations with providers regarding that?
Oh, you bet. And it's funny because 20 years ago, the conversation was, I can't get any information. I can't get any data.
Yeah.
And the conversation now is half the time, I get too much data.
Yeah.
So, that's somewhat of a win,
Yeah.
to go from nothing to too much. But it doesn't mean that you've got to, don't have to address both. So those that have been shut out, they're now getting introduced. I talked about the small physician practice. They've never had anything. So now they're going to be getting something. But then those that have been connected that are getting too much, you got to solve that problem now. And, these are the consequences that come out of progress, and it's got to be addressed. So that really will not be addressed it's partially addressed by us. So what you're now talking about is just, for example, a slew of CDA documents coming back.
Yeah.
Because you're picking up every endpoint in the country where they have any information. So you could get back anywhere from 1 to 200 documents. Well, that's unmanageable. You can't do anything with it. And it's either the network that will start to address it. I can talk to you about that, but also the edge system, the EHR that's bringing that in, is going to have to either work with a network that does do something with it or do something with it themselves. But at the end of the day, between the network delivering up all those documents and the user dealing with them, that has to be done. So what we're doing is we're taking all of those CCDAs that come in, and on the fly, because we don't hold the data, we're not a clinical data repository vendor. So we take them on the fly, and we can clean them up. You can actually run them through a grader and figure out where the problems are, fix the loin codes or whatever, and you can do a cleanup. Then we deduplicate where there's duplicative data, and then we create a summary view.
Okay.
So in addition to all the documents, whether that's 5 or 50, we add another one. So there's a 6th or a 51st. So that last document we add is a summary view, which is probably going to be the first thing they ever look at. So it gives not a longitudinal record, but it's a summary based on those CCDAs, and then you can drill down on them from that summary. But that we serve up, and actually Veradigm I talked about, that's going to be the first thing that they offer. So there's going to be a button when you see a new patient or an existing patient, you're going to be able to get your update by hitting that button and looking at that summary. If it's a new patient, it's very helpful. And if it's an established patient, there's changes, it's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a new world. We're going to have to cope with some of the ups and downs of it. So I think it's great. So thank you so much, John.
All right.
Welcome to the Tell Me Where It Hurts trade show edition. I'm here with Bob Catter, who's the president of First DataBank. So welcome to our podcast, Bob.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing at this HIMSS. This HIMSS it's kind of kicked itself back up again. And what are you seeing as far as trends and the direction of healthcare IT?
I mean, I feel like we're experiencing a surge. It's maybe not what it was before 2020, but it feels like there's a good energy here. Obviously hearing a lot about generative AI, but I'm also hearing a lot about kind of more clinical topics, how that's going to affect that. And, probably what we want to talk about today, at least from our standpoint, since I'm spending a lot of time in our booth, I'm hearing a lot about decision support and how we can make decision support work better than it works today, which I think from the clinician standpoint is not that well.
I would agree with that. It is not that well. And with all the generative AI stuff going out there, it's not really vetted yet. The transparency is not there. The training is not. There's a whole host of issues that kind of, as a clinician, makes me a little nervous. But it's going to get there sooner or later. So tell me about where FDB's direction. If you're talking about AI, are you guys going to start to use that technology?
Well, we've been using kind of maybe older AI technologies like NLP, natural language processing, and those types of things for years now. So we think it's a tool set. At the same time, all of the data that we use, that we have our customers in the industry use, is human vetted. So we're looking at maybe some new things we can do differently with generative AI. The idea of pulling information out of notes, particularly on the unstructured or the documentation part of the notes. We think it's exciting, potentially, what this kind of tool can do, but so we're, I think, still in the experimentation stage.
Yeah.
We are putting some thoughts around investing in some areas, but we're very, very committed to a human in the loop approach, which I kind of said a minute ago. And I think we're going to be staying with that. I mean, I think at some point we maybe could imagine a world where there's not always a human in the loop, but for now we kind of think that's where we're headed. As you say, this stuff is not completely vetted. It's not tested. I think, even recently with this HT1 ruling, there's a lot of, I think, more oversight, which there probably should be from the federal government on how these tools are going to be used inside of clinical systems with decision support, et cetera. So we're learning, we're looking at the tools, but we're staying, on the path that we're on already. So.
Well, you've done it very well for so many years. I can't imagine changing that direction too much. So HTI-1 is kind of interesting you brought that up, because that set of regulations is so new and it's so nebulous right now. We're all kind of struggling to figure out what exactly is it aimed at. So I'm sure you're looking at the same thing.
Yeah, we're obviously the final reg just came out. We're looking at it really carefully. I think for now we're in that set of third parties they haven't yet gotten to. I think they're kind of working at the kind of clinical software vendors themselves right now. But we have no doubt that it's coming, and we're looking at it, and that's probably about all I can say. It's almost too new, and I think the whole industry is just trying to digest it at this point.
Exactly. What kind of trends do you see here at HIMSS this year?
I mean, I kind of said I don't. I feel like we're in day one, and I mean, it's a lot of the same stuff we've been hearing before about interoperability ought to work better. What are we going to do to leverage artificial intelligence, whether the new brand or the old brand? And again, I think, from what I'm hearing that these systems ought to be simpler for clinicians to use. Maybe that's a trend I'm hoping for more than I'm hearing, but
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
The one thing I've noticed that a lot of these companies are not asking the providers, the clinical people that are going to use their products, what they really need or want. Do you see that?
I mean, I think that's fair. This in particular, I mean, HIMSS used to be much more provider focused, and now it's seemingly more of a vendor show. So I think you could very easily have that concern here, but I think that's kind of maybe a problem we've had in our industry all along. Yeah. Some of it is maybe meeting all the regs or meeting the guidelines, but we've pushed out a lot of stuff. I mean, I know we've recently brought a couple more physicians on board, and we're trying to get that input into our solutions, maybe more than we ever had before. And I think we have an clinical executive advisory board where we pull in clinician viewpoints, but maybe as an industry overall, we haven't done as well with that as we could. There are a lot of physician-led companies out there, and probably a growing number. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged by that.
Yeah.
One thing about clinicians, we like to be asked.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Bob, thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah. Appreciate your time.
This is Tell Me Where It Hurts, live at ViVE. I have Kat McDaviit here, who is well known in the industry and pretty much knows everybody. And I'm really curious to see what you think of ViVE this year, and what do you think the overarching themes are?
All right, so just to be clear, it's not even lunchtime yet at ViVE, and on the first kind of official day, right? So it's early days. I love ViVE. I think it's awesome. I love the collaboration with Chime. I love that it's much more health tech focused than health, and I do love health too. Themes overall so far that I've seen through my short jaunt through the exhibit hall, and I'm also moderating a few panels, and one of them yesterday was on AI. So obviously, as you know, everybody's talking about AI. They think it's awesome, blah, blah, blah. But I'll say, I mean, I've had some really good down-to-earth conversations about it lately, including one that I had live on this panel I did with the Enable Health people, with Dr. Michael Sook and some of his partners at Geisinger, about AI, using AI to transform surgical behavior. So it was like, pretty nerdy, brainy topic. And what's been awesome about all of the true AI experts, like not just the salespeople working at companies that are saying stuff about AI, the true experts are like, hey, we got a long way to go to make it work in healthcare. And I love the grounding nature of those comments, where some of them are like, hey, we're just starting with automation right now. We had the CEO of Vine on our talk show a couple of weeks ago, and he made a great analog to a toaster. AI and healthcare being a toaster. I don't know. I love it. I need to make a meme or something with it. But he was saying, like, what is AI in healthcare? Is it just that the toast pops out? Like, how are we going to get better here? Are we going to be able to butter it? Like, what's going on? So I think that's so far official day one for me. Like, that's what I'm seeing is the real dirty dirt of what AI is in many cases just automation right now.
That's so interesting. Being a physician, being a provider, I talk to a lot of colleagues out there, and they're kind of excited, and then they're kind of scared, I would say. And because they're, first off, when it first came out, and AI's been out for years, it's just now in the last couple that it's really taken off. But the providers I talk to, first they came out, well, it's just going to replace you. You don't need a clinician to do anything for you. The AI, just put your stuff in, it's going to come out with a diagnosis. Then all the hallucination things came to light. So maybe it's not really that going to do that. But now they're getting excited about how to take care of more mundane tasks, not particularly related to actual patient care. So have you heard anything like that in your circles?
Yeah, no, I'm super lucky that we have this talk show and I get to interview all these luminaries. So we had Nikhil Krishnan on the show maybe a couple months ago. And, you know, we take a little bit of a bullshitty approach to our show. And so we asked him, my co-host Lisa Berry and I asked him, hey, like, what do you think about AI in healthcare? Like, do you think it's dumb? And he said, it's going to do a lot of dumb stuff, like you're saying. And so that isn't to say, and some people like got all offended because I guess they have nothing else to do other than watch our talk show, right? And like have feelings. But I agree with them. Like what he was saying is actually like, it's going to automate more basic functions. It's going to free up time for providers, hopefully and theoretically, right? And it's going to do stuff that's like not that exciting for the first few years. And then maybe later, sure, maybe it'll take over doctors, but I sure hope not and don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Primarily why I don't think so. Because AI can only be as good as the information it is provided. Right now, who knows, maybe it'll be, I don't know, whatever. But I don't know if you've noticed, but like the data in healthcare is trash. Like
yes, it is.
Trash data.
Yep.
So we're feeding these AI models on like total bullshit, right? And I give the example often of my own medical record. So I am deathly allergic to fire ants.
Okay.
And I have an EpiPen and all those things. And in my medical record, which I have tried to have amended every year for 6 years, it says I have allergic rhinitis.
Well, that's a little different.
It's a little different than allergic to, like, going into shock, fire ants, right? So that's what my record says. And it does, there is an amendment, there's a note that says fire ants.
Of course.
It might be CP record, but yeah, so that's what we're working with.
So interestingly, in this new world of interoperability, and thank goodness that Mickey Tripathi, who I've talked to several times, has got this
Mickey
through.
Tripathi's a boss.
He's going to get it done, which he's starting to get it done now. But I've also, on the other side of the receiving end of interoperability, the providers I've talked to said, what am I going to do when all of a sudden the medical record does get opened up, and then all of a sudden I get it, and it may or may not be correct. So talking about your fire ant allergy is perfect. My wife had one of the RSV shots, and she got an allergic reaction to that. So it's supposed to be in her chart. It isn't. I checked.
Yep.
So you're right about the data. The data's got to be correct. And I think providers are starting to think, well, wait a minute, how am I going to sift through all of that to make sure I know exactly what's going on with all this stuff coming in from the patient? So I'm really curious how that's going to play out in the future, especially using AI to try to sift through stuff. Because in my newbie part of this going forward, I'm not convinced yet that it really is going to do a good job of sorting things through and making it correct.
Well, yeah, how is it going to correct it, right? I don't know if it can, at least not now. And then even then, it's difficult for a provider to amend a record. Or how do you deal with, you have multiple providers and one of them has something different and you no longer go there and you moved, right? And
right.
That information is still being collected and aggregated with your information. Like that's under your identification. So I don't know. I like, again, it's like the toaster. Like we're in the toaster phase right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think any physicians are at risk of losing their jobs.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like my listeners to know?
So other theme of my day today has been interoperability being one system, right? Like, you know, we can have interoperability if everyone uses Epic or everyone uses Unitas or everyone is using the same thing. And I'm just like, yeah, that's like not the point. And I think we're seeing some of that with the issue with Change Healthcare, right? They've been attacked, frankly, right? Which is terrible. But that one set of infrastructure has been underlying so much of our healthcare system, right? And it's causing a ton of disruption. And so I often think about this with TEFCA, or, sorry, I'm taking a right turn here on interoperability.
That's okay.
TEFCA, or the information blocking rule, which is my favorite rule ever, by the way, not joking. And I think that we need to remember that there's not one single system that we should rely upon to run our healthcare system. And I think we need to really think about what interoperability is. This is not one system. It is not just a few systems. We need to be able to actually all use systems that work best for us, mitigate risk, right? And like really embrace what that is. And I don't think it's just TEFCA. I don't think it's just information blocking. Although I hope it is, because you can do a lot with that. But that's those are my feelings this morning on this Monday.
Well, interesting on interoperability, to go a little back to the left turn with that. I'm of the opinion it should be moving much more quickly than it is now. Right now, the only thing you can share, I believe, is diagnoses, medications, and maybe lab reports. There's a lot more in a medical record than those three things, and especially as a clinician, I want everything. Send it all, and I'll decide what's good, what's important, what I can correlate together, or what I can't. My recommendation to Mickey was, pedal to the metal. Let's go.
Yeah, no, and I feel the same way about public health. I mean, I think you're talking specifically about TEFCA, the currently information pieces that are going to be shared right now. I feel the same way about public health, right? I know there's a big move to leverage TEFCA to get public health. And I think Mickey has actually accelerated quite a bit with some of the amazing teams at CDC, but it's not fast enough, right? There's so much work that has to be done right now, and it can be done faster. And it just needs people just need to make it a priority. And unfortunately, and I say this as someone who does a lot of data deals, who goes data hunting and does all that stuff, is that there still is some hesitance to moving faster, because it's become a competitive advantage to have data. And so that's one reason I'm hopeful about TEFCA, right? Is I think it will level the playing field. And information blocking too, seeing some of those civil penalties that have recently come out, I think that's going to be useful and force people to do it. We had a gentleman from Highmark Health on our show earlier today. I think he was the Chief Transformation Officer. Is that right, Melissa? Richard? Talking about similar things, like how do we move the industry faster, and how do we not make data a competitive advantage? So, I think there's people that are doing stuff. It's just taking a while.
Kat, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks.
I'd like to welcome Joy Rios to Tell Me Where It Hurts, the ViVE event. Joy is the founder and host of Hit Like a Girl podcast, which is a really, really great podcast. It's fun to listen to. If you've not listened to it, you ought to give it a shot. So, Joy, welcome to our program.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit about what you see here at ViVE this year, and what you think is important, themes, things like that.
One of the things that I noticed was straight from the beginning, we have incorporated the patient voice, and that is something that I love to see. So one of the first sessions that I saw today was about patients spilling the tea on what their experience is like in tech and healthcare and whatnot, and really just understanding the patient experience of how all of the ideas and systems and technology that we implement, how does it actually affect them, and how do they feel about it? How has it changed their patient journey? I'm really, really happy to start seeing that being integrated into the conversations.
Have you heard any of the conversations? What seems to be the theme?
Well, the session that I was listening to, they were talking about the implementation of telehealth, for example. And so imagine, before the pandemic, there was the idea of telehealth and something that felt like it would be in the distant future of something that we could eventually get around to. But how has it actually changed their life since, we went through the pandemic, and then all of a sudden we decided it was a priority, and here it is. And, a lot of their regular interactions with the healthcare system is now through telehealth. And so for folks, one woman in particular, she was on the stage and she was like, I have a vision impairment, so to not have to drive, and specifically to not have to drive like an hour to get to go see a doctor, it's really beneficial and has a huge impact on the way she interacts with the healthcare system.
That is amazing. And I remember a time where doing anything over the phone wasn't reimbursed, it wasn't talked about, thought it was dangerous, and now it's really turned the corner. The pandemic kind of showed us that can actually happen, which is kind of fun. And there's a lot of companies now popping up with telehealth this and telehealth that, key care and things like that. So,
Well, and especially for chronic patients, she was mentioning one of the benefits of not really sitting in the waiting room and actually being in a place where germs are spread, right? Of sick people hanging out.
absolutely. So what else have you seen other than just the patient experience in telehealth? Anything that my listeners would...
There had been conversations on climate, which I am very interested in. There's conversations on Medicaid and how we can expand Medicaid. I think I've seen the incorporation of nurses. This is the first time I think that they've had a whole nurses program here, and I haven't been able to go to a lot of that, those sessions yet. But just to know that they are there has been really great. And I will say, I went through with a fine-tooth comb the agenda, and it's been hard to decide which sessions to go to. There's so many great sessions, and so I really commend the ViVE team for putting quality content for us all to learn from.
It's really good to see nursing start to rise up a little bit more. And as a physician, people need to understand that it's really the nurses that deliver care.
Yes.
Physicians may direct that care, but the nurses make the rubber hit the road. And without good nursing, healthcare would not advance. So it's fun to see them be a part of that conversation. What other conversations have you seen that's new and different?
Well, I think that those ones are really important, because when you think about something happening to you but without your input about it, I feel like it's a big deal to be bringing different stakeholders in and saying, okay, what is your opinion? How does our health system affect you and your day-to-day work? And if we're changing things, like, what will the effect of that be? And making sure that, like, we're doing as much as we can to support the good people that are doing a lot of the hardest work out there, right? Preventing burnout. And so, of course, the AI conversation, that's everywhere. Where we can't get away. You turn the corner in any direction and there's an AI conversation, which is very interesting. It's not like it's new, in the sense that I don't think we were talking about this even last year at ViVE, right?
Not at this level.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, AI is one of those things that has been around for quite a while.
Yes.
It's just in the last several years it started to get a little bit more in with OpenAI doing what they did, and now there's at least 20 plus platforms doing this kind of thing. I think it's cautious optimism about it. I think as a physician, it's got to be transparent and consistent and be vetted so it's not a problem. So healthcare is a little different animal. If you're doing a business case for marketing, who cares if you make a mistake?
Right.
If you're doing something with healthcare and patient, you can't make mistakes. So I think that's kind of where we are now with that cautious optimism going forward.
I feel like the AI conversation, two things come to mind. Is one, of course, the cybersecurity aspect and making sure the data is safe with 100% top priority. But I also think that the bias conversation needs to come into play.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of ways that we need to be cautious about implementing AI if it is biased by not intentional design, but just, you have to test that stuff out of it. And I don't think we're there yet.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And bias in healthcare has been there forever. I think my concern is that AI may accelerate that bias if we don't put it in check.
Yeah. That's the part that everyone is very excited of, how can we implement it in all of the right ways? And I think when it comes to automation and getting farther faster, it's really important on things that don't have the implications when it comes to health or outcomes, right? So it's just, I don't know, when you think of a chat bot for customer service, that seems reasonable. Yeah.
Right. And if it makes a mistake, your iPhone didn't do what your chatbot told you to do, so no big deal.
But if it has to do with dermatology, and that we don't look at light-colored skin the same as dark-colored skin, and that could have far-reaching implications if it's not implemented accurately.
And to your podcast point, there's gender bias.
100%.
That is just loaded into some of this. So there's a lot of things to keep your eye on as all of this stuff rolls out.
One thing that's funny about so with Hit Like a Girl, I use AI on a regular basis. I'm doing ChatGPT all the time. But I use it to sometimes like, hey, make a picture. Because, DALL-E is incorporated into it. It's sort of the text to image, which now we have the text to video, which is a little bit frightening too. It's just like how incredibly believable it is. But on the DALL-E, like there's been several times that I will say, okay, let's put a group of clinicians or a group of doctors sitting in a table around a conference room with a mic. And you're just like, and I've been working with it for months, and it knows that everything about what I'm doing is like women based, and with that as the slant, and it'll still show up as like all men in the room.
Yeah.
And so it'll work with you if you prompt it differently. Make sure that, but you have to be very intentional about it. If you leave it to its own devices, it will default to the status quo, which is something that I am constantly challenging.
Absolutely. Consistency it doesn't have yet, that's for sure.
Right.
Well, Joy, thank you so much for coming on our program. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.
I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Tell Me Where It Hurts.